Today we're going to be having a first look at this. It's the Peak Water Jug, a really interesting and highly anticipated product that I'm pretty excited to get into. Now this was a Kickstarter project. It was backed, I think, back in May 2018. It has, like many Kickstarter projects, been a little slower than anticipated to deliver, but it's here now and they're starting to fulfill units to Kickstarter backers. I was one. I backed this with my own money back in the days before Patreon, and I will confess that Maxwell Colonna-Dashwood, one of the minds behind this, is a friend, and I occasionally give him a little kind of advice on stuff, but I'm not involved in this project, so to speak. But this is literally my first time getting hold of one, touching one, seeing one, and I'm interested to see how it's going to perform. Let's get inside the box. Now, first things first, we have the all-important test strip. We're going to be testing our water because the whole idea of this jug is that it tailors your water out of your tap for coffee. Not for tea, not for minimum lime scale, but for coffee flavor. And that's a really interesting idea, and I think a pretty new idea. And so this is dedicated as a whole concept to better tasting coffee. Oh, and here's the jug. Now, I think that's actually a pretty good-looking jug. I think there are many uglier water jugs, water filtration jugs on the market. They're often not particularly pretty. It's not see-through, which might be an issue for some people, but I think it's a nice, neat-looking thing. The colors are kind of interesting and distinct. The highlights of blue around the whole thing. Let's get it opened up and let's have a look at the interesting bits, which is this. Now, if you've used a water filter before, you'll know that this is a big chunky thing because it's doing a little bit more than a traditional water filter might do. If you watched a previous video, we cut open, I think, a Brita water filter cartridge to explain how that worked. We're not going to cut this one open because I need to use it to make water for coffee. Like all water filters, what we're going to need to do is prime it, charge it, get it going the first time. You can never just use these straight away. In this case, we need to run 2 full batches of water through it at one particular setting to prime it, to get it ready. Then we'll test our water and see what number comes out that will suggest the setting on the dial to get us the best water for coffee. So let's do that. So once it's all in place, you set the filter to position number 4, and then we fill it twice, and we just throw that water away because it's not good. Not good to drink, not good to use. Let's do that. I'll be back in a second when I've done that. So while that water's kind of passing through, we need to do one more thing, which is work out where we should set the setting on the jug, right? Typically what you have in a jug like that is a bypass, where most of the water is going to go through the transformative resins that will change its water chemistry, but in some cases some may pass through only a carbon block that'll clean up any negative tastes, but it won't necessarily be softened or treated in any way. The harder your water is, the less can be bypassed. And essentially the lower the lifespan of the filter too, but we'll come to that in a second. So you get a test strip. What's interesting is that this is a total alkalinity strip. So we dunk it in for 5 seconds and then we lift it out. We don't shake it. We leave the water on there for 10 seconds and then we look at the color. See where we're at. So I would say we're at 120 according to this test strip or that color marker there. And so that will decide how we set the jug's bypass, which will also determine lots of other stuff. So that's that. Let's see where we set the jug then. We set the jug at 3 on the bypass settings. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to measure this water, which is tap water, and I'm going to go into a bit more detail. I'm going to take the TDS, I'm going to do a more sort of expansive test on alkalinity and hardness to see what the water chemistry is like. And then we'll put some water through the Peak and we'll see how it's changed the chemistry of the water. Has it improved it? And at the end of that, we'll just make some coffee and see how it tastes. Seems reasonable. First of all, we're going to do a little TDS test on the water. This isn't particularly interesting in many ways. It doesn't tell you much about the water other than its conductivity. So here, apparently 300 ppm. Not as bad as some parts of London, for sure. That's just a number worth paying attention to, roughly to give you an idea if things are changing dramatically at a very sort of top-down level. Surface level, if you will. This doesn't tell you if the water's hard or soft, it just says there's this much conductive stuff dissolved in it. That's all. We talked about TDS for a long time as an industry, and it wasn't actually very helpful. But if you see your TDS shift suddenly, well, that's notable. That's still interesting and worth paying attention to. We start at 297. Now we take 5 mils, and we're going to, first of all, we're going to do a hardness test. So the way hardness tests work is that in this case I have 2 different solutions. This is my reagent, I think it's called, where I'm going to add 2 drops only, and then I'm going to mix thoroughly. And then I'm going to add a drop at a time this reagent. Maybe it's not reagent, my chemistry is bad. We're going to add this stuff, and when it changes color, the amount of drops will tell us the number of degrees of hardness. Each degree of hardness accounts for about 17 parts per million of calcium. This might take a few drops. That's 5, 7, 8, 9, 11. Oh, we're getting close. 12. Yep, 12. So you can see that color change happen there. 12 drops, 12 degrees of hardness. That's pretty hard. So about 200 ppm calcium. Now we do the same test for alkalinity. Now as a test, this one's a little simpler. There's only one droppy thing to put in here. If you put 1 drop in, it should go 1 color. Lovely. And then how many drops is it going to take to switch it back to another color? 6. Oh, we're nearly there. And 7. And 8, 9. There's our color change. So we're at 12 degrees general hardness, 10 degrees carbonate hardness, I guess. A little bit higher than the little test strip suggested, but not problematically so. And if I'd let this a little longer, you can see it had gotten a little bit darker, closer to the 180 line, which seems a bit more accurate to me. So we'll tune the jug to these more precise numbers, and we'll see what it does to water. So we set the bypass to the right level, we set the filtration to the right level, and we've filtered some water. Let's start with that good old-fashioned TDS measurement. Has much changed in that regard? We were at nearly 300 before, we're now a little bit under 200, which is a notable change, but it doesn't tell us what's changed. Let's find out. So let's start with general hardness. 1, 2, then let's add our reagent. I think reagent is the right word for this one. So it was 6, we look close, 7. Yeah, there's definitely 7 drops, 7 degrees. So down from 12 to 7, a reduction. Let's see what happens with our carbonate hardness. 4. Yep, 4. So that's really interesting. So we've gone from 12 and 10 down to 7 and 4. But the real question here is, how does it make my coffee taste? And to answer that is a little bit difficult because I'm not really sure how to benchmark it. So I'll say now, there will be a video in the near future where we compare the Peak water jug to a Brita, to a Zero water jug, to the BWT water jug, and we'll see which one makes the best tasting water for coffee, in my opinion anyway. Here, for now, we're going to do the obvious test. I'm going to brew with tap water, which shouldn't be good, and I'm going to brew with some Peak water. To try and assess this as fairly as possible, we're just going to do 2 different cupping bowls. I can boil the water in 2 different kettles. It'll be a simple, quick brewing experience and pretty free of variables. Let's do that. Now, this method of tasting, if you want to learn it, I did a series of videos on how to do this kind of tasting at home. There'll be a link in the description down below. So these are too hot to taste right now, so it's a good opportunity for me maybe to talk a little bit about how I feel about this jug itself. Now the fit and finish on it are okay. The materials choice is okay. It's not the most premium feeling thing in the world, but frankly that matters a lot less to me than whether it transforms my tap water from disgusting to delicious. The decision to make it an opaque material rather than transparent is an interesting one. If I'm honest, I do miss seeing the water inside the jug to know its levels. Obviously you can pick it up and feel very quickly and easily whether there's much water in it, but yeah, an interesting decision. Overall, I like the shape. I think it looks good. I like the colors. It's a nice jug. It should fit neatly in the wall of most people's fridges. Now, the capacity is one thing to talk about. At the setting I'm at now, I would have a theoretical max capacity of 110 litres. But here's the thing, with any water filter, you should be changing those cartridges every 60 days, regardless of how much water you put through them, from a hygiene perspective to prevent bacterial growth, that kind of nasty stuff. So at that rate, 110 litres in 60 days, you'd need to be using about 1.8 litres of coffee water a day, every single day, to max out the cartridge. Obviously, what I can't test yet is how this is going to perform across those 110 litres. I'll just have to use it to understand, is there a gentle degradation of performance? Does it hold steady and then just fall off a cliff at the end? I don't really know. I think you definitely taste it in your coffee. It would change quite dramatically as your water gets less filtered, harder, potentially has higher alkalinity. You will know when your filter is dead. But I don't know, and I can't yet test, how the filter performs over time. But we'll see. Now, the filters themselves, the way that they are designed and the way that they work is that you can fully recycle and recharge them. Peak Water will pay for your postage for you to return them because they can essentially refresh them completely and reuse them. When they are needed to sort of go into recycling, they are fully recyclable, I think. So overall, I think that's a really nice touch, and I hope many people take them up on that and send their water filters back. Now, because they're still in pre-order phase, you can't actually buy just the filters on the website yet, because I think they need the filters to fulfill orders for Kickstarter backers. But looking at the suggested RRP, it appears that a filter is about £12.50. That may change, that's not confirmed, that's just looking at the difference in prices between packs with filters and those without. This is nothing official, this is just sort of speculation at this point. So 110 litres for £12.50, you know what I mean? It's not bad, 12.5 pence a litre, 12 pence a litre, less, 10p in some cases for some people. I think the max capacity based on bypass is about 140 litres, so all in all, relatively inexpensive as a per litre price or a cost to process the water from your tap. So let's give it a taste. Let's see how the Peak performs in this bowl against good old London tap water. This should be a very low bar to clear. London tap water makes coffee taste gross. Ugh. Muddy, harsh, bitter. It has lots of texture, but it has no clarity of flavor whatsoever. No real origin characteristic. There's just this kind of generic coffiness shines through. Let's see how Peak changes things. Oh, that's interesting. Go again. Lots more acidity. Not too much, but a nice little lift in acid as well. More sweetness and absolutely more clarity. This is 10 times better than that. It's not the single best brew of this coffee I've ever had, but so much better, which is to be expected. But this is really pretty tasty. Well, I'll say so far so good. That definitely improves London tap water quite dramatically. We're going to have to wait till the comparative tasting with the other water filter jugs to see how it really performs in a bunch of blind tests. That will be much more interesting for me to really see, is it ahead of the competition? Is it really doing everything it wants to do? But so far, unquestionably, a big improvement in taste. Now, what is interesting is that while this setup process, while the basics of this are very simple, right? It's very easy to understand. This is how you dial it in. This is the recipe that will make your coffee taste better. There is links or guidance in the manual to more complicated, more complex kind of ideas. How you might tweak your filtration for espresso, how you might tweak it for different styles of coffee. Maxwell's gone pretty deep. There's some really interesting recommendations in there, and there's more on their website. So I think that's pretty cool. What I think we'll start to see is as those first Kickstarter orders are delivered, more and more people start to use them. Hopefully, the comments on this video will be full of people reporting their experiences. Are you one of them? Have you got one of these? Has it arrived? How has your experience been so far? I'm pretty impressed with what it's doing to water, and I think the jug is okay as a physical item, but how do you feel? Do you have massively different opinions to me? Has it made your coffee 10 times better than it was before? I'd love to hear from you. And let me know if there's things you want to make sure I test in that future review of all the different jugs that are there to filter water to make it taste better. Leave me your thoughts, your ideas down in the comments below. I look forward to checking those out. I'm going to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you had a great day.